So, Amy, I am so excited to have you here. Almost a year later, I saw you at South by Southwest. I've known of you before then, but I saw you on stage and I was just blown away. So I had to ask our mutual friend, Hugh Forrest, to make the introduction to us. The first thing I want to ask you is I like to ask our guests how they got started in their field, whether it's healthcare or aeronautics or whatever it is. But you're a little bit of a unicorn in the fact that you're something called a quantitative futurist. I'm hopefully getting that correct. And because you are so unique in the industry, I want to talk a little bit about what is a quantitative futurist, and then let's talk a little bit about how you got there.
Sure. Um, so I think the easiest way to explain this is because there's a lot of people very interested in foresight and futurism right now. There are a lot of different ways to do foresight. Some of it is focusing on a particular industry. So there are such things as healthcare futurists. Some of it is veering off into science fiction. So there are speculative futurists who write for a living or create content for a living. I'm a generalist who has always used very, very rigorous research methods and data, and whenever possible, modeling. That's not always possible. To try to produce, rather than guesses or hypotheticals, answers to questions that we have about the future. So the easiest way to think about what I do is probably within the realm of economics. Economics, I think, uses data to look back, to try to interpret and understand where we are right now. My academic background is economics and game theory, so I like to think of taking those same skills and just applying them in a forward direction.
I love that. And it is a unique skill set. And I'm a marketer at heart, and I've worked with a lot of really smart people, but it is rare that you can find someone that deeply understands strategy and how that works. And I love that you brought up that concept of a speculative futurist because it leads into my next question. One of my early guests, I think actually he was the first one I interviewed, but the second one to appear on the show was a gentleman named Jerry Zucker. Jerry happened to be the director of the movie Airplane and Ghost, among many others. And one of the things he did, which it looks like, according to your bio, you also do, which is advising writers, directors, producers on projects for the streaming services we know all too well, Netflix, Hulu, Marvel. And you want to make sure that these people are portraying the future in popular culture like correctly, right? That
Mm-hmm.
science, what they're saying works, does work, that you look at that trajectory. So if this is supposed to be 2035, you're like, yes, this would be plausible in 2035. So tell us a little bit about how this role came to be. And are there any crazy examples that you had to sit down with the showrunner and say, there's no way that's going to fly. That's just too esoteric.
So the answer to that second question is yes. I'm
A
not sure
lot.
how much I can talk about publicly, but let me address the first part of the question because I think we're all consumers of media, but this also I see the same thing in business and in government. Um, One of the reasons why, like if you stop and think about a movie or a show that was set in the future and pieces of it were janky, whether that was the green screen that got used or the like I know everybody loves The Bourne Identity. I could not watch that movie without like, come on, like that's not the way
Yeah.
GPS work, right? And the problem is, it distracts from what matters, and what matters always is connecting to other people. So when we are telling stories, like as a marketer, you know this. What's the point of all of this? What's the point of the story? To connect to another person, and the same is true in a boardroom or with a group of executives. You are trying to connect with those people, or they are trying to connect with each other for the purpose of seeing the world differently, making a better decision, whatever it might be. So if the story that you're telling about the future is not grounded in real world data and truths as we know them to be at that moment in time, then all you're doing is creating a gigantic, unnecessary distraction. One of the projects that I worked on that I really loved was with Bo Williman's team. So he did House of Cards, first couple of
Yeah.
seasons,
Yeah.
was
Yep.
showrunner. He also worked on he brought like the first big streamer to Hulu, and it was called The First. And The First was about the first group of people to go to Mars. It doesn't take place on Mars. It's just the trying to get there. So that show, which is now several years old, was set in the year like 2034. So my job was to imagine, and not just imagine, but like plausibly, what do we think that world is going to look like? And if I had come up with like, everybody's going to have a virtual reality doppelganger digital twin, could that have looked cool? Sure. Would it have totally distracted everybody? The answer is like, yes. And also it's highly unlikely that that would happen. So instead, that world is much more subtle. People have smart glasses, and they are using sort of like a wristband that connects to, which interestingly, Facebook or Meta seems to be working on now. Screens look a little different. Cars look different, but also the automated features, they're all within the realm of what's plausible. And how do we know that? Because we did a enormous amount of research and modeled what we could. So we're not guessing. And again, that's certainly important in storytelling, whether you're a Hollywood screenwriter or a marketer. Now, all of that stuff really matters, but it also matters incredibly when you're dealing with investors, regulators, CEOs, boards of directors, et cetera.
I have a question about your books, but because of the fact you mentioned that, and I feel like there's a logical connection, shame on me for not doing this when I set this up. But you do advise some pretty important leaders globally, numerous Fortune 100 CEOs, the White House, Congress, European Union, United Nations, to name a few. People may have heard of some of those. Your work informs global technology governance, long-term policy planning. So I think all those things that you just mentioned, which apply to sci-fi and shows, are that, but like times a million, right? Because we want to get this right because we want people we want your show or movie to be credible. This is people's lives dependent on it, people's futures, countries' futures depend on it. So let's talk a little bit about how you ensure you're giving them the best advice, knowing the enormous impact you have on these companies and institutions.
So that is a good question because it allows me to talk about where foresight fails. So you can be the smartest person in the room and you can know how to build very good models and scrape all the data there is, right? So like there is a way to answer somebody's question about the future, whether it's a near term, should we invade this country or not? Or a longer term, we've got to figure out how to grow by X percent. What do we do? Or our business model is going to fail 5 years from now, we think, or it's going to be a new competition. What do we do? There is a way to answer those questions accurately. Now, that answer the moment that you have that answer, you still have to take inputs from the outside world because things are changing. So like, unless you're Dr. Manhattan and you can like stop time, right? You're going to have to constantly update your priors. Okay. That being said, it's not enough to have the right answer. You have to know how to socialize that answer. You have to understand how to get people to take action. And that is where foresight ultimately fails, because what you wind up with either are people telling really cool stories that just nobody gives a shit about because they can't relate, these crazy futures, whether or not you're right. If they don't understand why there's a sense of urgency on that now, then you fail. It also fails when people have a very hard time seeing outside their current worldview, and you've done nothing to bring them along the way. I can give you two concrete examples of this involving real world experiences I've had. One involved the senior most leaders of a news organization. Gosh, this would have been, what year is it? It's 2026. So this would have been 2004, I think. I had been living in Japan and when I came back to the United States, it felt like I had gotten in a time machine and gone backwards. because the United States at that point, the mobile phone ecosystem was pretty far behind where Japan was. So I'm talking to, they wanted to know about growth. It's the birth of the commercial internet. Where is the world going? Where will value be created? And how do we participate? That's kind of what I do. So I'm trying to tell them this future of a distributed internet that we will access from a computer that we put in our pants, like that we carry with us, right? That we could take pictures with, like my phone. I thought I had it next to me. I don't, otherwise I was going to show you. My phone, I had this iMode, and that phone had a camera, and it could access the internet. It didn't work in the United States, but to me, it was obvious what was coming. And also obvious that the whole model for news in the United States was going to implode. And I totally failed to convince them. A couple of reasons why. The first was, at that point in time, I'm showing them this like phone from Star Trek, right? And at that point in time, the most advanced thing that you could do on a phone in the United States was play Snake, which like maybe 5 people listening to this will remember. But this was like a very bare bones, sort of like early days, pixel-based video game for your phone. That was their whole orientation. And I'm trying to explain to them things that were like light years ahead. So while I was right, I hadn't yet figured out how to relate this in a way that would cause them to take action. So I failed. I failed to get them to take action. The other time was Twitter. I was called to brief a couple of an undersecretary at the State Department on some issues related to national security and other things. And this was right at just maybe like 2 years after Twitter existed. And I was explaining to them how I saw a future world where misinformation would spread, and all of these different things, and here's all the data to back all of this up, and here's why I believe these things to be true. I'm dealing with a bureaucrat who, again, has no orientation to the social web, has no idea what I'm talking about, and I was not able to explain in a way that galvanized action. And while it turns out that I was right, it didn't matter. So this is my long-winded way of saying it doesn't matter if you've got the best models, you've got all the data, you're the best person at foresight. Foresight, to some degree, is about, answering the question correctly, which can be done. But then you have to get people to take action.
Well, I appreciate the transparency there, because that is obviously the downside, right, of doing what you do, which is you could be the smartest person in the room, the smartest company in the room. But if you can't, I like the way you phrase this, like if you can't translate that or phrase it and position it in a way that they can understand and accept, then it's dead in the water. And I just was lucky enough to talk to Dr. Vanessa Carey, John Kerry's daughter. She's a special envoy to WHO, and we were talking about the impact of global climate change on healthcare, and the fact that she has the physical data that shows like the billions of dollars of impact economically that are happening as a result of this. And the fact that it's like, doesn't matter how smart you are, how much of a megaphone you have, if you can't say it in a way that people can hear you, it's a moot point. So I appreciate that context. I think that's really important. I do want to go back to your book question that I wanted to ask you, because I love this story, and I'm going to put it in the show notes, but you've written 4 books, at least that I could sort of ascertain from my research. The first one was called Data, a Love Story, How I Cracked the Online Dating Code to Meet My Match. I'm not going to spoil anything here. And I believe that led to you doing the TED Talk, which is one of your, sort of big national moments. That's the one I'm going to put the link to, because I really want people to watch it. It's short. I think it's only like 20 minutes. And then your third book was an international bestseller called The Big Nine, which reframed global debates about AI. So obviously 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. Although data related. So if you had to pick a favorite out of the 4, which would it be? And give us maybe a little context.
Gosh.
I know it's like telling you to pick your favorite child, but
they are all very different books. The first book kind of happened by accident. I used data and manipulated, without technically breaking any terms of service, the algorithms on a dating website, which is not what the kids use these days. The kids these days are swiping. At that point, it was still typing stuff on the web. I used it, made some discoveries about how online dating works, met my husband. So that was the first book. The second one is an explanation of how to do the first chunk of the methodology that I created, which is to identify trends. In my world, the things that matter are they're longer term. So something that's trendy or that's a fad is not useful when it comes to like strategy and planning. You need the long-term stuff. So the second book that I wrote, The Signals Are Talking, explains how to do that. The third book, as you noted, which I was researching in like 2016 probably. I was early to this, but it came out a year and a half later, and it was about what I thought the future of AI would look like and the corporate entities that were going to control the future and why that was really bad. Unfortunately, a lot of that turned out to be true. That was another like big warning. Anyways, it was widely read, widely cited, and just I couldn't get people to action. The latest book is about the future of AI converging with biology. And it's about something called synthetic biology, which, again, a little early, but next May, there is an athletic event focused on human enhancement that's happening in Las Vegas. So like, I'm a pretty avid cyclist in my athletic world. Doping is not allowed for all the reasons. This is like, the Tour de France, where they actually encourage you to dope. And the point of this is to see how far we can hack our bodies, not just for longevity, but for other reasons. And obviously there are all kinds of ethical, national security, all kinds of problems with that going forward. Those are the 4 books. That last book is called The Genesis Machine. I can tell you my least favorite of them, and that was the first one. And that is because, here's why. It was the first time I'd written a book, and it really wasn't edited. There was a lot that I didn't know. And as with everything, the first time you do something, you learn a lot.
Lots of bumps and bruises, right?
Yeah.
Well, so that's more fodder to watch the TED Talk because one, as you're probably ascertaining from this interview, Amy is a great storyteller, and it is a really funny but well thought through TED Talk, and it does give the essence of the book and how you sort of, narrowed it down to ultimately the pool that led you to meeting your husband. And I wasn't sure if you wanted to spoil that, but I loved it.
Yeah. No,
I was like, I don't know if she's going to meet her husband at the end of this, and lo and behold, you did, which was beautiful.
It's pretty obvious from the beginning. We're still married. Funny thing. So again, there's like a lesson in here for everybody. So that TED Talk really took on a life of its own, and for a long while, was the in-flight entertainment on Delta airplanes. At least in the United States. I know this because I was on a Delta airplane. I saw my face on everybody's screens, and I was standing on line to go to the bathroom, which is like, it was a long flight. And anyhow, somebody was like, "Oh my God, it's you." And I was like, and I have to, go to the bathroom right now. And it was also the first thing. Marriott had a deal with TED for a while. So like it was my face that was in people's hotel rooms. I bring this up because I think it's interesting. People often plan for failure. Like, what happens if this doesn't happen for me? I don't get into this school, whatever, all of these things. Nobody plans for wild success. You might think about it in an aspirational way, but nobody actually makes a plan. And it didn't occur to me to make a plan for what if this TED Talk goes viral, and for a while it was the most viewed TED Talk. And it took a while talking about marketing. There was a lot of brand confusion about who I was. Bravo was chasing after me they wanted me to do they wanted to have me do a show, like a series about matchmaking.
Which
below
you
deck.
Totally could have pulled off, by the way, obviously.
Well, and by the way,
pay grade.
I'm a am a giant consumer of Bravo content and love Real Housewives, so especially the Salt Lake City group. So yeah, in retrospect, but the point really is like, I think sometimes it's you have to plan for extreme success, and how does that change things?
I can imagine, and I love that story on the plane. By the way, that is like talk about a meta moment. I do want to talk about something that you created going back to 2010, and this was really I was very intrigued by this. But you and a few other collaborators started something called Spark Camp, SPARK. The mission was to bring groups of exceptional people together to share knowledge, develop meaningful personal and professional relationships, and to launch fresh ideas that would propel society forward. So, can you talk a little bit about that origin story, how you came up with the idea, and are you still involved with this,
Sure.
as involved as this with this
Yeah.
as you were in the early days?
So we Spark Camp has pretty much gone dormant at this point, because the founders have moved on to other things. Um, Again, I think necessity tends to or a something an urgent thing, right, is what tends to give rise to new ideas and innovation. And the long story short is I was at somebody else's conference. I had just given birth. I was still breastfeeding at that point. I hadn't been away. I was working like 2 weeks after I gave birth, but I was at home, and somebody made a promise that this was going to be like this great conference. It was right during the time of unconferences, which used to be a thing.
Yep.
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 Unconferences were a group of people got together, and you sort of wrote down on a note card the session that you wanted to host, and they would put it on the schedule wherever there was an open space. That format I love because it crowdsources from the people who are assembled the things they are interested in and curious about. However, it favors extroverts and tall people. And as a short person, I'm extroverted, but I'm short. What that meant in reality was it's a bunch of like tall guys, tall dudes who get their ideas up there. And it was a horrible conference. It was the same people I had seen all over the place, same conversations. And I just thought, like, why am I doing this? So I got a couple friends together and said, if I foot the bill, do you guys want to have an experiment? Like, see if we can reinvent this whole thing and do it differently. So the answer was yes. It was kind of a professional retreat, invite only, very hush hush and secretive. We had a really great 10-year run. All of us got busy. COVID happened, so we're not currently doing it anymore. However, next year, I will be spinning something back up that is sort of an evolution of what Spark Camp was.
Great. Well, when you do, shoot me a note, and I'll make sure that I promote it through the channels. One of the things I do want to do, and I know we only have a few minutes left, so we'll move quickly here, but you spent years helping organizations anticipate the future. You're still doing this, and you've actually given a couple of good examples of, AI and Twitter and other things, the smartphone. What's one emerging trend today do you think leaders are still underestimating, whether those are Fortune 500 CEOs or global leaders?
Sure. So this is maybe a little bit more in the technical weeds, but and this is less of a emerging trend and more of a convergence, which is when trends and forces sort of converge and result in something net new that has just never existed before. And that would be something that I'm calling polycompute. So, for a long time, since the beginning of computers, things have kind of evolved in a linear way. So the tabulation machine, sort of classical architecture computers, that's what you and I are using right now to have this conversation. I mean, these have gotten more powerful and better, but they haven't like materially changed. The thing that's new now is artificial intelligence. And so whether you're a government regulator or a company that has to make decisions about digital transformation or like capital investment or whatever it might be, or educators, like schools trying to figure out what to teach, that's still our orientation, that there's just this one type of computer, and it does cool stuff now, right? AI, but like this is kind of it. in reality, there are other types of computers that already exist. One is a quantum computer, which you've probably heard a little bit about.
I have, yeah.
There's another one that's actually a biological computer that is real, that uses brain cells and fuses them with something like a CPU. And it is literally a brain-powered computer. And there is something called organoid intelligence, which is different from AI. It's OI. The reason that this matters is because I think we have to start accepting the fact that we might need a different type of computer to do a different type of thing in the future. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow if you're a Luddite type of person, which I don't mean like no disrespect, right? It's more just like, I know you don't want to learn another thing. But if you're a company, what that means is, if you're trying to manage different parts of your business, there are times when a quantum algorithm might make more sense, or there are times at some point when a biological computer might make more sense. But as humans, we're used to sort of getting stuck into a single pattern and liking the easiest, simplest thing. The reality is we're all heading into a much more complicated world, complicated by technology, that is going to be more complex, not less, in the near future. So this polycompute convergence is upon us. And that could be a great thing, or it could result in a crisis.
Well, thank you for making us smarter. And I've been doing technology for literally almost 50 years because my dad was a computer programmer all the way back to the 60s. And I've not actually heard of that. I've heard of some of the other elements you talked about. I do want to sort of give you a plug and give you an opportunity to find out where people can connect with you. Is there any place else that LinkedIn or other places you'd like them to come and check out your content?
Yeah, we publish a lot of resources for everybody that are free on our website. So it's ftsg.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so I publish various things there. I mourn the loss of Twitter, what used to be Twitter.
I know.
And
the land of the trolls now.
Yeah, and I'm sad about that because that was kind of my place. I haven't quite figured out. I mean, I guess I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky and Threads and all over the place, but I'm just
they're a little bit fragmented, unfortunately,
yeah,
not the same. Yeah,
I'm even on Mastodon. I'm just not super active like I used to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So probably LinkedIn
tricky.
would be the best place.
And she does give good LinkedIn. I can attest to that. So, all right, 4 really quick questions. We can do these rapid fire, and then we will wrap up. In doing the research, I learned some interesting things about you. You mentioned one of these, which was the competitive endurance cyclist. The other was you're an assistant scoutmaster, or you have been. What's one thing about you that people don't know that you're willing to share here?
I have a giant picture to my right of George Michael.
I love that. Oh my goodness.
People really, really, so again, like good lesson here, whether your orientation to George Michael is like 80s pop star, cool, not cool. He was a journalist and an activist, and people don't know this about him, and was brilliant and turned out to be a brilliant composer, played a lot of the instruments on what he recorded, and is sort of not widely known. So as you meet people throughout your life, or you come into contact with people, everybody's a little bit of an onion. And if you can pick at and peel away at those layers, you might be very surprised and delighted by what you find.
Well, clearly you're media trained, because I love how I directed that at you, and you're like, I'll make this about me, but really it's about George Michael. And I love finding that out about him because I'm a big Wham and George Michael fan. Speaking of famous people, because you've alluded to this, you've had a chance, I'm sure, to meet some really amazing people. You inform a lot of the world leaders. Who in your life has impressed you the most out of all the great people you've met?
Gosh, I spent some time with Jane Goodall. She, there's a lot of people who sort of talk a big game. She actually very much lived what she preached. So she was incredibly impressive. David Remnick it's like super in the weeds, but he's longtime journalist, New Yorker editor. He speaks in perfect sound bites. That guy speaks exactly like he writes, which is kind of mind bending. I've never met somebody whose brain literally works that way. Um, gosh, I've met a lot of people. Trying
Those
to
are good
think
ones,
of,
though, especially
yeah.
Jane. I mean, that's, what a profound impact she's had. Last two questions. Biggest regret.
I I know it's a pretty common question. I don't have any because I work really hard to not. I'm not trying to like skirt the
Maybe it's missing
question.
out as a Bravo host, right? Like you could have done
No,
that and done your dating show.
no, I don't. I really don't have any regrets because I've either worked hard to make sure that that I'm not going to be in that position, or when things went wrong, I've spent a lot of time analyzing and thinking about. So it's not. I don't have regrets. Yeah.
That's a great answer. I love that. And I'm not shocked that you said that, given who you are and how we led up to this. And then the last question is related to music, and maybe it's George Michael, but a band or an artist that you would have liked to have seen that maybe is no longer with us or isn't ever going to tour again that you would like to have taken advantage of.
Rage Against the Machine. Here's why.
Amy, I love you so much. I didn't know, like, I never would have guessed that you would have said that.
Yeah. So they actually were going on tour, and then Zach hurt hit anyhow. One of the guys like hurt his
Zach De
knee.
La Rocha, the lead singer. Yeah.
One of the problems is the music that I like. So I love Soundgarden and Rage, and that's kind of Beasties. It's kind of my genre. These are concerts where you're going to get injured, probably. And again, I'm a tiny short woman who is not going to fare well in a mosh pit, and that's just not my. So I would have loved to see those guys live. It would have been hard to do that in a way that was probably physically safe for me. So there you go.
Well, fun fact, and then I'll let you go. So 1993, it's the third Lollapalooza. They opened up. So 500 people, me,
Mm-hmm.
Rage Against the Machine, down in Rhode Island at an Air Force base. Fast forward 2011, LA Coliseum headlining 100,000 person venue, and one of my all-time favorite bands. So never would have guessed. Love that as an answer. And thank you so much for taking time to share your smarts and to come on the show today. It's been an absolute joy.
Yep. Thanks for having me.